Welcome everyone to the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Ann Arbor. We're going to start singing number 1003 in the teal hymnal. So please rise in body or spirit and join us in singing 1003.
Good morning. I'm so glad to see everyone here was able to appropriately adjust your clocks and make it here at this time, right? Even though our biological clocks may feel like this is an hour earlier than we should be here. At any rate, it's a joy to be in community with you all this morning. Welcome to the First Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Ann Arbor, Michigan. We are a congregation who has been an active liberal religious voice in Southeast Michigan for over 150 years. Whether you're joining us here in person in this sanctuary, or from the comfort of your home, or perhaps at a later time this week, thank you for the gift of your presence. My name is Carter Smith, and I have the pleasure of serving this congregation as the acting director of music ministries. And we are joined this morning in worship by Reverend Manish Mishra-Marzetti, our senior minister, Stella Anderson, our director of spiritual growth and development, Allison Halerz, our pianist-in-residence, Mike Halerz, our technological consultant, and Barbara Lynn, a member of our lay worship leaders program. We are also joined this morning by several special guests. Later in the service, we will hear from congregant Amy Beth Edwards, who will offer a beautiful reflection. We will also hear from members of UUAA's leadership development team, Kim Clugston and Glenn Harris, who will update us on their important work. And last but certainly not least, I'd like to recognize 4 of the members of our music ambassadors team whom you have already heard from and who are helping to lead the music in today's services. If you're not aware, the music ambassadors are a team of 6 members of our UUAA music ministries, and they have been active since 2019. They serve the broader UUAA community, acting as a resource in responding to questions for feedback related to the music ministries. They also help support me, the acting director, and all of our music ministries by providing administrative and leadership support. I know personally I have found this team an invaluable asset. They helped bring me up to speed when I was brought on the staff team in fall of 2021, and they've acted as a thoughtful sounding board for ideas as we have navigated this transitional period in the music ministries. I am grateful for their selfless service to this congregation and to the music ministries. So thank you, music ambassadors. If you are new to this congregation or joining for the first time today, we are so grateful for the gift of your time and presence. If you would like to learn more about our community, you can join us for a newcomer welcome directly following this service in the Jackson Chapel, which is located just past the social hall as you exit through these double doors. There you'll have a chance to meet staff and other congregants, to ask questions, and to help us get to know you more deeply. If you are joining us via live stream, we hope that you will take a moment to introduce yourself in the chat so we can greet you. We also encourage you to visit our website and take a newcomer survey at uuaa.org/newcomer survey. This will help us stay in touch with you and share information about upcoming events and services with you. And speaking of events, please mark your calendar for our March Friday Fun Night, which will take place this coming Friday night, March 17th, at 6 p.m. After the enchilada dinner at 6, Reverend Manish will offer programming for the adults in attendance, which is a viewing and discussion of the film One Night in Miami, a civil rights era themed movie. There's also programming for children and youth, including a dance party, game room, and a viewing of Marcel the Shell with Shoes On. We hope to see you this coming Friday. What do you hunger for? What do you long for? Right now, perhaps it's the hour of sleep that you lost last night, or maybe a donut from the social hall after the service. But further than that, what do we genuinely need in our lives? I would invite you to find a place of centering and grounding in our hearts as we explore these and other questions during our shared time together this morning. We are gathered for worship.
Good morning. I am Barbara Lynn, a member of our congregation's Lay Worship Leaders program. At the beginning of each service and at other times when we gather, we Unitarian Universalists light our chalice, the symbol of our faith. The flame we kindle warms our hearts and draws us together in the collective wisdom of community. These sparks of love and wisdom steady us and guide us toward the justice-filled future we long for and are actively working to create. As we light our chalice in the sanctuary this morning, we invite our online community to light your own chalice at home. As you do so, you may choose to share your location with the simple notation in the chat the chalice is lit in, along with the name of your town or street, or even just the room you are sitting in. This Sunday, Glenn Harris will join us on the chancel to light our chalice. Glenn, thank you for joining us. In the spirit of community, let us now say together these familiar words as our chalice is lit. We light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. Thank you, Glenn. When I joined this congregation almost 30 years ago, I was thrilled to discover that Unitarian Universalists are a people of covenants, not creeds. We are bound together not by a fixed creed dictating our beliefs, but by the promises we make to each other as we journey together in community. In covenant, we companion one another as we work toward a future shaped by the hands of justice. Please join me as we say together the words of our covenant. The spirit of this church is love, and service is its law. This is our covenant with each other, to dwell together in peace, to search for truth in love, and to help one another. Thank you.
Good morning. Do I need to be liked? Absolutely not. I like to be liked. I enjoy being liked. I have to be liked. But it's not like this compulsive need to be liked, like my need to be praised. Does anyone know who said this? That's Dunder Mifflin branch manager Michael Scott from a little show called The Office. These words are meant to make Michael look silly and small. The problem with Michael is that he's just too needy. Too needy. Think about that for a second. To want to be liked, to like to be liked, that's too needy. Our story for all ages this morning would argue that wanting to be liked and accepted and welcomed just as we are is at the heart of being human. The Invisible Boy, written by Trudy Ludwig, illustrated by Patrice Barton. Can you see Brian, the invisible boy? Even Mrs. Carlotti has trouble noticing him in her classroom. She's too busy dealing with Nathan and Sophie. Nathan has problems with what Mrs. Carlotti calls volume control. He uses his outside voice inside too much. Sophie whines and complains when she doesn't get her way. Nathan and Sophie take up a lot of space. Brian doesn't. When the bell rings for recess, Micah and JT take turns choosing kids for their kickball teams. The best players get picked first, then the best friends of the best players, then the friends of the best friends. Only Brian is left, still waiting and hoping. JT glances in Brian's direction and just as quickly looks away. We've got enough players for our team, he tells the others. Let's play ball. In the cafeteria, Madison and her friends talk about her birthday party. The rope swing over the pool was awesome, says JT. Yeah, so was the water slide, adds Fiona. That was the best pool party ever. I'm so glad you guys had fun, says Madison. Everybody did, except Brian. He wasn't invited. At choosing time, while the other kids play board games and read, Brian sits at his table, doing what he loves to do best. He draws fire-breathing dragons scaling tall buildings, space aliens locked in intergalactic battles, greedy pirates digging for treasure, and superheroes with the power to make friends wherever they go. Hi, friend. Have a cookie. On Monday morning, Mrs. Carlotti introduces Justin, a new student, to the class. Brian smiles shyly at him. Some of the other kids sneak looks at Justin, trying to figure out if he's cool enough to be their friend. They haven't quite made up their minds yet. At lunch, Madison and JT watch Justin eat with chopsticks. "What's that?" asks Madison as she points at Justin's food. "It's bulgogi." "Bul what?" "Bulgogi. It's Korean barbecued beef. My grandma made it for me. It's really good. Do you want to try some?" "There's no way I'd eat bulgogi." And the kids laugh. All of them, that is, except Brian. He sits there wondering which is worse, being laughed at or feeling invisible. The next day, when Justin goes to his cubby to put away his backpack, he notices a piece of paper with his name on it. Justin, I thought the bulgogi looked good. Brian. At morning recess, Brian finds a piece of chalk on the ground and starts drawing away. "You're Brian, right?" "Yeah." "Thanks for the note." "Hey, Justin," Emilio calls from the tetherball court. "You're up next." "Sorry, I gotta go," says Justin. "By the way, that's a really cool drawing," he adds before taking off. Back in class, Mrs. Carlotti asks the kids to team up in 2s or 3s for a special project. The kids scurry around the room to pair off. Brian heads toward Justin. "I'm already with Justin," says Emilio. "Find someone else." Brian looks at the floor, wishing he could draw a hole right there to swallow him up. "Mrs. Carlotti said we can have up to 3 people in our group. We're only 2. Come on, Emilio, let him work with us." "Okay, I guess." Mrs. Carlotti gives the class directions for the project. Your assignment is to work together to write a story about what you see in that photograph. Use your imagination and have fun. "Whoa, cool," says Emilio. "What kind of people do you think would live in houses like that?" "I don't know, but I bet Brian could draw them to go with our story," says Justin. Brian smiles as he takes out his lucky pen. It's lunchtime again, Brian's least favorite part of the day. Another 20 long minutes of kids talking and laughing with everyone else but him. "Brian," he hears someone shout. "Hey, Brian, over here!" Brian turns and sees Justin waving him over. Emilio nods at Brian as he makes room for him at the table. "Cookie?" "Thanks." Maybe, just maybe, Brian's not so invisible after all. The end. I bet we have some Brians in the room. I'm sure we all know a few Brians if we weren't one ourselves. Brians are quiet and introverted. Brians can be creative and kind. Brians might not always raise their hands, even when they know the answer. Brians might not volunteer to be a team captain in gym class. Brians hang in the background, hoping to be noticed. Brians don't take up very much room. I was a Brian, especially after my mother died and my whole world turned upside down. Kids in my class didn't know what to say to me, worried they might say the wrong thing and make me cry, so they just didn't say anything at all. I remember spending a lot of time alone, wandering the playground at recess, watching them all laughing and playing together from a distance, resigned to this deep loneliness that had settled into my bones. I desperately longed for one kid to smile at me or ask me to join in the game or to say a kind word. I needed a Justin. Even now, decades later, I still find it hard to be vulnerable, to let others in, because for so many years I was on my own, and it's difficult to trust people when you've felt abandoned. But that craving, that deep, deep longing, it stays with you. I wish so much for my own kids, for all kids, to know that they are worthy of love and affection. They all need connection. They need to be seen and loved and valued and celebrated for their inherent worth and dignity. We know a lot about the most basic needs, the stuff that comes first in Maslow's famous hierarchy of needs. But what comes next? Kids need to play. Sometimes they need to play hooky. They need mental health days just like adults. They need time outside. They need to be bored. They need books. They don't need homework. The list of needs is endless, especially if you ask a parent. But when you boil it down, they need to be surrounded by that radical, welcoming kind of love that feeds your soul. Does that fundamental longing ever really change? As we grow, our needs expand and become more complex. New branches and tendrils sprout and spread, much like a tree. But at the core of us is this same fundamental longing for love, for deep connection, for an expansive, inclusive, compassionate circle of care. May we stand together and hold one another in a loving embrace. May we feel into our roots that we are perfect and beautiful and miraculous. May we open our arms wide in joyful invitation, answering the call of love and care. As Reverend Lisa Bovey-Kemper says, there is room for all in this circle. May it be so. And now is the time in our service when we sing our children to their programs. I invite all of our young people to follow their teachers out of the sanctuary as the congregation sings with love.
Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. Your divine, my divine. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. Where you go, I will go, beloved. Where you go, I will go. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. Your divine, my divine. For your people are my people. Your people are mine. Your people are my people. Your divine, my divine.
We are so fortunate to have with us today Kim Cluxton, who chairs our Leadership Development Team, and Glenn Harris, who's our Board of Trustees liaison to the Leadership Development Team. Would you welcome them as they share some information and some words about the important work that this team does?
Good morning. My name is Kim Cluxton, and I serve this congregation as a membership of the Leadership Development Team. The Leadership Development Team is a standing committee that helps nurture leaders in the UUAA community. The leadership development team is made up currently of myself, Janet Calloway, Susan Randall, Arika Lycan, and Glenn Halerz. What has the leadership team been doing? Since 2020, we have offered online classes of centered leadership training through the UU Institute, which includes monthly Zoom discussions of 8 modules. So far, about 25 people from UUAA have completed the first or second level classes, with UUAA paying the fees. At this time, we are continuing to identify and meet with those who are interested in serving in leadership positions at UUAA in the coming year or beyond. That process begins when people recommend themselves or others, or we identify you through our participation in a range of small groups. To help us in this work, we are fortunate to have an intern pursuing her master's degree in organizational psychology at William James College, Kayla Guzovsky, who joined our team last month. Kayla will help us evaluate leadership development materials, communication, and processes. In addition, she'll help assess our leadership development needs and barriers with a focus on inclusivity. Welcome, Kayla.
The goal of greater inclusion and representation brings us back to a primary responsibility of our team, recruiting a slate of candidates for the Board of Trustees and the Leadership Development Team. This slate is presented for election at the June congregational meeting. The congregation will be electing several new members to positions on the board and the Leadership Development Team this June. As the result of a bylaw change the congregation approved last year, the leadership team will be expanding from 5 members to 6 this year and to 7 in 2024. If you are interested in learning more about the Board of Trustees or the Leadership Development Team and how governance works at UUAA, please stop by our table in the social hall between services any Sunday in this month of March. We'll have written information available, including the roles and responsibilities of board positions, a description of UUAA's shared governance structure, and a form to complete if you would like to recommend yourself or another member for nomination. You can also contact us at ldt@uuaa.org. The quality and effectiveness of our leadership is up to all of us at UUAA. Is it time for you to consider moving into a leadership role? Thank you.
Dreams and aspirations lie at the heart of our hunger for a better world and bind us together as we work side by side to bring alive our vision for the future. As we yearn to bring healing and wholeness to the world, we give of our time, our talents, and our energies. We sustain our bold good work, and it sustains us. This culture of generosity, the lifeblood of our community, includes the shared spiritual practice of our weekly offering. There are many ways to financially support the vital work of our congregation. As the ushers pass the baskets, those of you who are here with us in person may leave cash or check donations. If you prefer to give electronically, you can text UUAA to 73256 or visit uuaa.org/giving and select weekly offering for the fund. However you choose to give, thank you for your generosity. Your gifts will make real the visions we hold dear and nurture the beloved community for which we long. I invite the ushers to please come forward as this morning's offering is gratefully given and received. As our ushers come forward, I invite you to please rise in body or in spirit as we prepare to dedicate our offering. Please join with me as we say together our words of dedication. To the work of this congregation, which is weaving a tapestry of love and action, we dedicate our lives and these our offerings. Thank you. You may be seated.
Some of you might remember before the pandemic, our community had a year-long adult seminar on the spiritual practice of storytelling. What are the formative experiences of our lives that define how we understand what it means to be human? So taking personal experience and working with it to craft it into a version of spiritual storytelling, helping share with others the wisdom that we ourselves have found on our life journey. We had about 30 or 40 folks participate in that experience, and it was cut short by the start of the pandemic, but here we are some years later still having the opportunity to hear from some of those individuals. I am delighted to introduce to you Amy Beth Edwards, one of our congregants who participated in that seminar and will be sharing with us her experience entitled, "It's Okay to Be Hungry." Would you please welcome Amy Beth?
Good morning. Yes, it's been almost 3 years since I've been working on this. It's very exciting to be here. This morning, I want to talk about hunger. Hunger. It seems like a really simple concept, doesn't it? You're either hungry or you're not. You either just ate or you're going to eat, or it's time to eat, or it's not yet time. But hunger is more complicated than that, as we all know. And I want to tell you about the hungriest man I ever knew. This was my cousin Scott. And I'm going to say right up front, I'm talking about Scott in the past tense, because he died 6 years ago. One of my absolute favorite stories about Scott is actually about me and my 50th birthday, but I think it really captures his essence. I'd gone to Washington, D.C. with two of my best friends to celebrate, and on my actual birthday, I received so many texts. I could not keep count. And they came in throughout the day, just lovely wishes. Some people made videos. And it was, my heart was so full. I was so grateful. Every single person remembered, all my friends, all my family. But one person called. In fact, when the phone rang, I was so startled. I was looking at it in my hands, and because nobody calls anymore. And I saw that it was Scott, and I picked up the phone because you always picked up the phone when Scott called. We talked for a few minutes. He wished me a happy birthday. And when I hung up, I was struck right then by the vast, vast difference between reading the words, "Happy birthday, I love you," and hearing them in a voice spoken that you know and you love that voice. Scott was hungry for people. He would never text if he could call. And he wouldn't necessarily judge you if you texted. He would be absolutely baffled by that choice. And I want to show you, Scott had a baffled look, and I want to show it to you. I've practiced it over the years, but he would kind of tilt his head like this, and he'd screw up one side of his face, he'd squint this eye, and he would say, "Okay, question mark, question mark, question mark." And you knew he was wondering if maybe you could have made a better choice. When Scott was 3, he and his mother, Dora, were in a catastrophic car accident. They were hit by a drunk driver. They both survived, but Scott was left quadriplegic. He was so gravely injured, doctors thought he would need a ventilator to breathe for the rest of his life. And when I say the rest of his life, nobody thought that was going to be very long. The best case scenario for someone on a vent full-time is 10 years. That's the best case. Scott was 3 at the time of the accident. On my 50th birthday, he was about to turn 30. So he'd been on a ventilator for 27 years. Now, over the years, through intensive respiratory therapy, Scott was able to breathe on his own for minutes at a time. He was able to eat. But by the time that I was turning 50, his organs had lost most of their resilience, and he was once again wholly dependent on a ventilator, and he was getting all his nutrition through a feeding tube. Now, I knew Scott when he was able to eat, and he loved eating. His favorite meal, and he would, if he could have this for every meal for the rest of his life, it would be chicken tenders and macaroni and cheese. And man, he loved that meal. I was curious about what it was like to no longer be eating. What did it feel like inside? I wondered, did you feel full? Or was it a different feeling altogether? Was Scott hungry? I've read that so much of satisfaction from eating comes not from the food that we're actually eating, but from the acts of eating. So the chewing and the swallowing, the smelling, and the tasting. And I didn't know how that translated to getting everything through a feeding tube. So I asked Scott. I asked him what it felt like. And Scott got really quiet, and he got very still, and he looked at me, and he said, "I'm always hungry." Of course, towards the end of his life, that was about food. But Scott had lived a very hungry life. He ached for things and wanted things and needed things, and he pursued everything he could imagine. He wanted to graduate from high school, and he did. He wanted to get a job, and he found one training service dogs. He loved music, so he formed a band and recorded a CD. He loved David Bowie, so he created a rock alter ego as cool as Ziggy Stardust. Scott also hungered for connection. And I can tell you that he was a quadriplegic, but that translates into something very, very physical. He was in a chair all the time. He could not move except for his head. And because of his injury, he depended on others for every single thing in his life. Everything. Eating, toileting, getting in and out of bed, getting in and out of his chair. He had to be lifted and carried by others. And he was never alone. He couldn't be alone. His life depended on having someone by him at all times. Because of this dependence, he saw the connections between people. How could he not when the people by him had responsibilities for keeping him alive? He craved those connections and fostered them. And we, in turn, craved and fostered that connection with him. Text when you could call. Scott would always call. And Scott hungered for things that he never got to have. College, marriage. He really wanted to be a dad. These were hungers that he was never able to satisfy. Scott ran out of time, as we all will run out of time. And I want to just take a second to show you the shirt that I'm wearing. So this also sums up Scott. Every morning when he got up, he would post on Facebook, and the first line was always, "Today is going to be an awesome day." So this says Awesome Zone, and we all tried to live in the Awesome Zone with Scott. So shortly after that conversation with him about hunger, I was running errands, trying to accomplish, my usual 2 hours worth of tasks into one. Somewhere between Trader Joe's and Target, I realized that I was hungry. And my first thought, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit it, my first thought was, well, there's a McDonald's, I'll get some fries, I'll go through the drive-thru, I'll eat, and then I'll finish up the rest of what I need to do today. And then I immediately thought about Scott. And then I had a very profound thought. I thought, Amy Beth, I wonder if you'll live for 30 minutes with being hungry. I wonder what will happen. Will it be okay? And I remember that I had made a beautiful pot of soup yesterday, and I had dahlias on the table from the farmer's market. And if I could just wait, I could eat that meal at home and not in my car. And I decided to wait. I chose to be hungry and to just be with that feeling, instead of doing whatever I could to make it go away instantly. And I started to notice my hungry thoughts all the time. The times I thought I was starving, but I was really just bored. The things I did without thinking or intention. The things I did because those were the things I did. My hunger became a mindfulness practice, and I began to explore its contours. I started to use my actual hunger as a tool to figure out what I was really hungry for. I wanted to be healthier. I started doing yoga. I wanted to love my work, and I found work with people I loved. I'm not the healthiest person ever or the happiest, but hunger launched me in that direction. Scott died a few months after my 50th birthday. I think about him every day. I still talk to him in my mind. One of my life dreams has always been to run a marathon. But you hit 50, you gotta be like, is this gonna happen? And then I thought, well, maybe I could run a half marathon. And then I thought, oh, I couldn't possibly do that. And then I saw Scott's baffled look. And I heard him in my mind say, are you sure about that? And I realized I wasn't sure at all. So I trained and I ran that half marathon. I miss Scott. I miss him every day. I miss his voice. I would give anything to see that phone ring and hear his voice again. And I know it's not going to happen. But I am now the one who always calls. Thank you.
Please open to 298 in the gray hymnal. Rise in body or spirit as we sing 298 in the gray hymnal. Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow, giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor, both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end.
Thank you, Beth, for such a beautiful and vulnerable sharing and honoring of your relationship with your cousin Scott. How do we keep our senses awake? How do we stay alive and aware to what our deepest and truest longings are? And perhaps even more importantly, how do we distinguish between longings, between hungers that serve us well, and those longings, hungers, cravings that do not? I want to take us on a little bit of a deeper journey and reflection around that. And as I thought about that and held that this week, I remembered that it was 15 years ago this spring that I had a very disappointing experience. I had been in our ministerial search cycle and was being considered for a congregational job that didn't work out. It wasn't mine to have or be. And I was so heartbroken, really crushed and devastated. I had felt so deeply that this was exactly right, that there was this longing for this to be, and it was not going to be, and I was devastated and crushed, and I wasn't sure what to do with the pain that I was feeling. So I did a very Hindu thing. I went on personal and private retreat. I took about a week. I went to Utah. And when in the Hindu tradition, when we are in deep need, deep pain, it is very common for us to go up mountains, to be closer to something that is transcendent. And the harder it is to get up that mountain, all the better. It's considered part of that journey, part of the longing or the releasing of whatever needs to be released. And so I did a very difficult hike in southern Utah. It was actually quite painful on my knees. My knees kept buckling as I was trying to hike up this mountain. And I thought about giving up and turning around and stopping, but I knew why I had set out on this journey, and I knew I must get to the top of that mountain, and so I did despite the pain. And once I was there, I allowed the grief to just pour through me and course through me, and I wept by myself at the top of that mountain, fully feeling the disappointment and sadness that something I had longed for was not mine to be. And as that worked its way through my system, another longing emerged, one deeper, one that I didn't even know that I was holding. Not with this intensity, I wasn't aware of it. I was so lonely. And as I wept and wailed on the top of this mountain, that cry became a soul cry. Articulation, a prayer, a conversation with the universe of, okay, I get it. There's so much more that I still need to learn and I need to figure out. This was not it. This was not the door that I was supposed to go through. But if I have to navigate disappointments and more hard things that I have to figure out and learn, could I at least have a little bit of company? How about someone special in my life to just walk this walk with me, this stuff that is so hard and this so challenging? Could I have somebody in my life to just share some of these burdens and these challenges with? That was the deeper longing, and I wept and wailed and cried out that prayer, that hope, that longing, that desire, off the top of a mountain, staring out at valleys in the midst of clouds. It was literally days later I returned from that retreat. The day I returned from that retreat was the day I met the individual who's now my husband, Jeff. He didn't know that he was a part of today's sermon. But that longing for love, for connection, we heard that in Amy Beth's story of Scott as well. The longing for relationship, connection, possibility of even an intimate partner marriage someday, the longing to finish high school, the longing to maybe even go to college. These heartfelt longings show up in so many ways in each of our lives. And they're not just individual longings, they are longings that we feel at the level of community as well. It was just 7 years ago, that this community was in the midst of that longing for its next senior minister. Many of you, I'm sure, holding the anxiety and uncertainty of, who's that person going to be? I really hope that they're as special as Reverend Ken was in my life or Reverend Gail was in my life. I hope I'm able to connect with them in that same way, but you don't know. In the midst of that in-between time, you don't know that that's actually going to happen. And so this longing is intensely there, side by side with the anxiety and the uncertainty. You may be feeling it now. Some of us may be feeling it now. I do a little bit at times, around the fact that we don't have a permanent music director yet. Who's that person going to be? Will they be as special in my life as the other highly successful, wonderful music directors that our community has had? Will I connect with them as deeply as I did with the others? We don't know. There's an uncertainty, there's an anxiety, even as that longing is deeply there. Here's the irony of all this. What do we do once that longing is satisfied and met? We take it a little bit for granted. Oh, he's in my life now. I've got that partner, that husband. Oh, look, we got a decent senior minister. We kind of move on. Oscar Wilde had a quote about this. He says, there are only two tragedies in life. One is not getting what we want, and the other is getting it. And there's a lot behind that. You know, the not getting it, we all understand. There's so many things in life that don't play out as any of us may want or desire. But then when you get the thing that was deeply, achingly longed for, what do? We move on to the next thing. Oh, that needs met. What's next on the horizon that needs to be figured out? We stop valuing with this same level of appreciation and intensity the thing that was causing us so much pain, longing, uncertainty, anxiety. Herein lies lesson number one that I'd offer. We take so many of these deeply longed for things in our lives for granted. What if we didn't? What if we could hold in our heart, yes, I longed for that. I went up a mountain, painfully up a mountain, to pray for, to cry for, to articulate this longing for something. What if I valued it as deeply as I felt that longing and continued valuing it every blessed day? What if we each did that for the other longings that we've held, for relationship, for connection, for friendship, for intimacy, for professional accomplishment and achievement, for doing good in the world, for raising good children, for showing up as a good partner, spouse, friend, neighbor? What if we valued and continued to value all of those things as deeply as the longings in our heart that led us to each of those things? There's a story in the Zen Buddhist tradition. One of the Zen masters by the name of Dogen lived in Japan in the 13th century. And I had this spiritual longing that there's more. There's more that I haven't figured out that I need to figure out. And embarked on this arduous, dangerous journey from Japan to China in search of teachings and teachers to help him figure out whatever it was he thought he was missing. And there he encountered the Soto Zen tradition and had some good experiences with that and came back to Japan. But when he got back, he then wrote this: "Why leave the seat in your own home to wander in vain through the dusty realms of other lands? If you make one misstep, you stumble past what is directly in front of you." We sometimes don't have to go far to be able to discover that the things that we really need are right in front of us. They're not hidden, they're not far away. But the things we need may even already be there, already be present, which leads to a beautiful and important next set of wonderings. In order to not stumble, in order to not miss the thing that we may already have that's right in front of us, how do we distinguish between the thing that is a want and the thing that is a need? In the English language, we often, in quick everyday language, we use the word need and want as if they are interchangeable, as if they mean exactly the same thing, and they don't, as my own spiritual teachers will stop me and point out to me with great frequency to my chagrin. When I'm speaking quickly and I'm not thinking about it, I'll interchangeably use want and need, and no, slow down, slow down. You just referred to this thing saying you need X, you need to do something. Is that a need or is it a want? Need being something that is necessary, a necessity for our existence. A want being a desire. This would be nice to have, or I desire this to be the case, is not the same thing as a necessity for our survival or for our existence. The two are very different concepts. And here's the problem with this. The way we use our English language in our society, intermixing these terms as if they're equal, we human beings frequently confuse wants with needs. And then we begin to relate to a want, to a personal desire, as if it is a necessity, as if it is necessary for our physical well-being and our existence. And here's the problem with this. And we see plenty of examples of this in our culture around us. When we treat a desire, and we know often the things we desire to have happen, that we want to have happen, don't necessarily happen. There are many things outside of our control. We make many compromises for the sake of living in society and living in community. Many things we want or desire don't happen. And when we confuse the desire with a necessity, what happens internally inside of us is that we begin to amp up and spin up as if our very life was threatened by the desire not being actualized. We begin to behave in a threat response mode that is highly activated, highly reactive, and we're behaving as if our very well-being and existence is threatened when it is not, when it is simply a desire that is unfulfilled. This is a really important distinction. And therein lies, I'd offer lesson 2 for our continued reflection today and beyond today. Being able to slow down and distinguish whether what we're holding internally is a need, a necessity for our existence, or simply a desire, a want, is a critical spiritual practice and a critical tool that helps us in our own mental health and mental well-being. Now, I love that Stella referred to Maslow and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm going to channel Reverend Eric from last week a little bit. If I had a PowerPoint presentation, I could put up the graph that many of you have probably seen in your college or university classes, or perhaps in a high school textbook, that shows Maslow's discussion of hierarchy of needs. And these are needs. These are not wants that Maslow, a famous psychologist, helped articulate in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And what he talks about in terms of these tiered needs, the lower ones in the pyramid being more basic and more fundamental, and as you go up the triangle, you get to the top, they're kind of higher order needs. But at the bottom, you've got basic things like physiology. Do I have food? All right, if I have food and sustenance, then you maybe go up, do I have shelter? Do I have physical safety? All right, if we go up to there, then we get to another level, which is what we've heard a bit about today. Love and belonging and connection, emotional connection to other people is critical. It's a critical need for our ability to thrive as human beings. Do those things exist? Love, belonging, a sense of connection. If we go up from that, there's another layer which is about esteem, an internalized sense of worth. I'm a good and valuable human being on this planet, and others see that I am valued and valuable, a sense of esteem. You keep going. Now, these four that I just mentioned, Maslow uses a particular terminology. He calls them deficiency-based needs. What he means by that is, if we don't have that, one of these basic fundamental needs, we will be highly motivated to do whatever it takes to have some of those needs met. So if you don't have food, you will be highly motivated to figure that out, and you can't really focus and work on the other needs until you figure that out. If you don't have shelter and physical safety, you're going to be highly motivated to work that out. Then comes love and belonging, connection. That becomes the next highest thing to kind of work and figure out. And you work your way kind of up these things, these hierarchy of needs. You get to things, what he calls growth-related needs, in his language, self-actualization, which includes at that highest level things like living into our inner sense of purpose. Who am I? What are my gifts? How do I bring those alive in the world? How do I find meaning in my life and in the world around me? How do I live into creativity, finding that joy and that personal expression through that? How do I engage in personal growth? That project of self-learning and discovery, these are the kinds of needs that we can develop over time that are critical to our existence as human beings. It's important that as we kind of work our way up that Maslow hierarchy of needs, I invite you also to stop and notice how far you have come. In the spirit of not taking things for granted, stop and notice on that hierarchy of needs. Many of us already have plans for lunch this afternoon, or we know where to get lunch if we need it, on a planet where millions and millions are starving in acute hunger. Millions more have no shelter, even in cold weather like this. Many of us have a place to sleep tonight, and on and on. Don't take those things for granted. They are sibling human beings on this planet who can't take those things for granted. It's a shame. It's a shame if we're living day to day and we're just assuming that these things are there for me. They're not there for everybody. They really aren't. Notice how far you have come, and let your heart be filled with gratitude that many basic needs in your life are very likely being met. And then I'd add one last piece. This is maybe the third and final lesson I'd offer in connection with this. And this was never part of Maslow's theory or research, but I would offer it as a people gathered in a community like this, one organized around spirituality and ethics. This is a critical piece for us. How do we bring the essential spiritual ingredient of trust to bear as we work with our desires and our needs, our wants and our needs, fully recognizing that the vast majority of us don't get all of our wants and desires met, maybe even most of the time. And so, how do we live in a sense of trust in the midst of that common human experience? It's a common human experience. So can we notice in our own life trajectory? I can in my own. Let's take that example. That job possibility did not work out. A door was slammed shut. I'm feeling the pain and disappointment of that. And yet look, literally days later, another door opened, a different door opened, one that became life-altering and life-changing for me. We have experiences like this in our lives, and I invite you and urge you to reflect on that and notice that when a door is slammed shut, it is often directly connected to something else that is about to happen, about to open, about to unfold for us, and we're not always able to see it in the uncertainty and the pain of the moment, but invariably and very likely it does. And you can find those patterns in your own life journey. So if we can see that in our own life journeys, can we invite ourselves to a place of trust when we're feeling that disappointment and that pain? I'm sad about this. Yes, that door got slammed shut. I wasn't expecting that. But I know from my own life journey, when doors slam shut this painfully, this unexpectedly, something else happens. Something else is fomenting. Something else is being nurtured or birthed. Can I trust that? Can I allow a space for trust, for that to still unfold? You know, I was reminded as I reflected on all of this of the Rolling Stones. You know this song. Many of you know this song. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, you just might find that you get what you need. You get what you need. And if we can live in that trust that what we need, what we really need, will find its way to us, we can hold gratitude for all that is our lives.
Please turn to 108 in the gray hymnal. Rise in body or spirit as we sing 108.
My life flows on in endless song above earth's lamentation. I hear the real, the far of Him that hails a new creation. Through all the tumult and the strife, I hear its music ringing. It sounds an echo in my soul. How can I keep from singing? What though the tempest round me roars, I know the truth it liveth. What though the darkness round me close, songs in the night it giveth. No storm can shake my inmost calm, while to that rock I'm clinging. Since love prevails o'er heaven and earth, how can I keep from singing? When tyrants tremble as they hear the bells of freedom ringing, when friends rejoice both far and near, how can I keep from singing? To prison cell and dungeon file, our thoughts to them are winging. When friends by shame are undefiled, how can I keep from singing?
Friends, as you go forth into this new week, allow that song that is in your hearts, that is a part of your being, to flow gently and generously forth. Don't hide it. Don't shy away from it. Beauty and compassion and wisdom reside in each and every one of you, inside each and every one of us. Let it ring forth. Let it sing forth. Go forth in that spirit. Be the best that you can be. Know that whatever you encounter in the week ahead, you've got this. Until we are together again. May it be so. Amen.